Imagine this. A successful black businesswoman, Amelia Johnson, stands confidently in a luxury private terminal, ready to board her jet after a groundbreaking keynote speech. Yet, her world shifts in an instant. A crew member blocks her path, questioning her credentials, dismissing her presence, and refusing her access to the jet she owns. What happens next is nothing short of extraordinary. Calmly and firmly, Amelia navigates the situation with unwavering dignity, revealing her ownership of the jet and setting off a chain reaction that challenges deeply ingrained prejudices. Her response doesn't just put the crew in their place, it delivers a powerful lesson about respect, resilience, and breaking down the barriers of bias. This story isn't just about one incident, it's about the subtle, everyday challenges that individuals like Amelia face and the strength it takes to confront them. It's a reminder that dignity and justice are rights, not privileges. If you've ever faced a moment where someone underestimated you or questioned your place, this is a story you won't want to miss. Maldir McD, what do you think about Amelia's powerful response? Let us know in the comments below. If this story inspires you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life moments of resilience and justice. Now, let's dive into the incredible journey of Amelia Johnson, a woman who turned a moment of prejudice into a lesson the world won't forget. Amelia Johnson is not just any businesswoman, she's a trailblazer. At 48 years old, she has built a business empire from the ground up, earning her place among the elite in her industry. A keynote speaker at an international conference, Amelia is celebrated for her sharp mind, strategic vision, and unwavering perseverance. But even with her long list of accolades, the world still has its way of questioning her place. As Amelia stepped into the private terminal, the setting exuded exclusivity and luxury. Polished floors gleamed under the morning sun, soft leather chairs lined the waiting area, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air. It was a space designed for comfort and privilege, a space Amelia had earned the right to occupy. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer paired with understated pearl earrings, her every detail radiated quiet confidence. Her presence, commanding yet unassuming, spoke volumes of her achievements and resilience. Yet, as she approached the counter, the subtle hum of discrimination began to surface. The attendant, a young woman with a polished smile, greeted her without looking up. "Good morning, ma'am. Name and flight details, please," she said, her tone distant and procedural. Amelia calmly responded, "Amelia Johnson. Private flight to Chicago." The attendant's fingers moved over the keyboard, but a momentary pause revealed more than her words ever could. Her eyes darted to Amelia, her smile faltering slightly, and her expression betrayed a flicker of doubt. "Yes, Miss Johnson," the attendant finally replied, her tone suddenly hesitant. "The flight is ready. Would you like to wait in the lounge or board now?" "I'll board now, thank you," Amelia responded firmly, gathering her bag. As she walked toward the gleaming jet, the weight of curious, questioning gazes followed her, a silent suggestion that she didn't quite belong. At the base of the jet's steps, Captain Mitchell Green stood tall, his expression cold and uninviting. His uniform was crisp, and his polished shoes reflected the sunlight. He scrutinized Amelia as if evaluating her worth. "It's so sad." "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his tone clipped and devoid of warmth. "I'm here for the flight to Chicago," Amelia replied evenly, meeting his gaze. "This is a private flight," he stated slowly, as if explaining something complex. "I know," Amelia said, her voice calm but firm. "It's my flight." "Or." A faint smirk appeared on Captain Green's face as he folded his arms. "Right," he replied dismissively, "and I'm the president." The tension hung thick in the air, but Amelia didn't flinch. Instead, she held her ground with the quiet dignity of someone who had been underestimated countless times before. Her composed demeanor was an unspoken declaration of her right to be there, a right she had worked tirelessly to earn. This was more than a misunderstanding. It was a moment that reflected the subtle but pervasive biases Amelia had faced throughout her life. Little did they know, their actions would soon lead to a lesson none of them would forget. As Amelia Johnson stood at the base of her private jet's steps, the air seemed to thicken with tension. Captain Mitchell Green, a tall and imposing figure with a crisp uniform and a cold demeanor, blocked her path. His gaze swept over her, taking in her tailored blazer, designer luggage, and undoubtedly her skin. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his tone clipped and formal, though his posture spoke of skepticism. "I'm here for the flight to Chicago," Amelia replied evenly, her voice calm but firm. "This is a private flight," Captain Green responded slowly, as if explaining a concept to a child. "I know," Amelia said without hesitation, locking eyes with him. "It's my flight." His smirk deepened, a flicker of condescension crossing his face. "Right," he replied mockingly, "and I'm the president." The moment hung in the air, the quiet disdain in his tone unmistakable. Yet Amelia didn't flinch. She stood her ground, her calm demeanor refusing to yield under the weight of his doubt. "I'll need to see some documentation," he said, folding his arms. His voice had shifted to one of guarded authority, as if he were trying to protect a space he felt she didn't belong in. Without a word, Amelia reached into her bag and retrieved her phone. A few taps later, she held out an email that clearly confirmed her ownership of the jet, the flight number, destination, and her name all prominently displayed. Before Captain Green could react, a flight attendant named Erin appeared, clipboard in hand. Her polite smile faltered as she caught sight of Amelia and the tension in the air. The shift was ready, and she was on her way. "Is there a problem, Captain?" Erin asked, her tone wary. "She claims this is her flight," Captain Green said, his skepticism so thick it was almost palpable. Erin took the phone from Amelia and scanned the email. Her eyes widened slightly and her face turned pale as she handed the phone back. "It's all in order," she said softly, her voice tinged with nervousness. Captain Green's jaw tightened, and he reluctantly stepped aside. "Welcome aboard," he muttered, though the words carried no warmth. As Amelia ascended the steps of her own jet, she felt the tension still lingering behind her. Inside the cabin, the opulent surroundings of cream-colored leather seats and dark walnut accents reflected her success, but they couldn't mask the discomfort that clung to the air like a storm cloud. 2 minutes later, Erin approached Amelia with a forced smile. "Would you like a drink before takeoff, Miss Johnson?" she asked, her hands clasping the clipboard tightly. "Water, please," Amelia replied, her tone polite but measured. Erin nodded and turned, but her steps faltered as Captain Green entered the cabin. His presence was a sharp intrusion into the space, his eyes flicking briefly to Amelia before settling on Erin. "Step outside with me for a moment," he said to Erin, his voice low but firm. Erin hesitated, her eyes darting nervously between Amelia and the captain, before following him out. The door hissed softly as it sealed behind them, leaving Amelia alone with her thoughts. Sarah leaned her head against the steel railing and raised her eyes. She leaned back in her seat, her hands resting lightly on her lap, but her mind raced. She had been in this position too many times before, the subject of whispered conferences, her competence and legitimacy debated, just out of earshot. When Erin returned, her movements were stiff and her face was pale. She placed a glass of water on Amelia's tray table with a faint clink, avoiding eye contact. "Let me know if you need anything else," she murmured before retreating. The jet's engines roared to life, and as the plane began to taxi, Captain Green emerged again, this time with a younger flight attendant named Laura. The tension in the air thickened as he addressed Amelia directly. "Dr. Johnson," he began, his words clipped and rehearsed. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding earlier. I want to assure you it won't happen again." Mr. Johnson began with the warning, and when the waitress approached him with another customer in the room, he insisted on shoring her up. Amelia raised an eyebrow, her silence compelling him to continue. "This flight is typically reserved for corporate executives," he added, his tone bordering on condescension, despite the apology. "I am a corporate executive," Amelia replied calmly, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, of course," he said quickly, a faint flush rising to his cheeks. "But as you can imagine, we have protocols in place to ensure the integrity of our operations." Amelia tilted her head slightly. "And those protocols include questioning passengers who own the jet?" Laura shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Captain Green, whose jaw tightened. "There's no need to take this personally, Dr. Johnson," he said finally, his words defensive and hollow. Amelia's faint smile didn't reach her eyes. "What you see as protocol, Captain, I see as assumption. And assumptions are always personal, especially when they seem to follow certain patterns." She frowned, struggling to make sense of something. Captain Green opened his mouth to respond but thought better of it. He nodded curtly and retreated to the cockpit, his authority diminished, but not entirely subdued. As the plane climbed into the sky, Amelia turned her gaze to the window, watching the clouds roll past. The moment wasn't new to Amelia. It was part of the daily grind of being questioned in spaces where she not only belonged, but thrived. The quiet erosion of dignity through 1,000 unspoken doubts was a storm she had weathered all her life. Her resolve, however, remained unbroken. Amelia Johnson was not just fighting for herself, but for the dignity and respect that should be a right, not a privilege. And as the jet leveled out at cruising altitude, she knew this was just another round in a battle she was determined to win with grace, strength, and unwavering resilience. As the jet leveled off at cruising altitude, the cabin settled into a deceptive calm, but the tension from earlier lingered. Amelia Johnson sat quietly in her seat, gazing out the window at the endless expanse of clouds. The opulent interior of the plane, a reflection of her hard-earned success, offered little comfort in the face of the subtle yet pervasive biases she had already endured. Shortly after takeoff, Aaron, the flight attendant, returned with a meal tray. It was meticulously arranged on fine china, showcasing the luxury that came with private travel. Yet, as Amelia glanced at the tray, she noticed something missing. She murmured. "Excuse me," she said, her tone even but firm. "Could I have the dressing for the salad, please?" Aaron hesitated, her eyes darting briefly to the back of the cabin before responding. "I'll check, ma'am," she said, her voice tinged with nervousness. Minutes passed, long enough for Amelia to recognize the familiar rhythm of avoidance. When Aaron returned, she was empty-handed. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she stammered. "We seem to have run out." Amelia raised an eyebrow, her gaze steady. She knew from years of experience that running out of something as basic as salad dressing on a private flight was highly unlikely. It wasn't about the dressing. It was about the dismissal disguised as a logistical oversight. "That's unfortunate," Amelia replied, her voice calm but laced with meaning. "Perhaps next time the flight manifest can ensure that the owner of the jet is adequately accommodated." Aaron flushed deeply, mumbling another apology before retreating. Amelia let the matter drop. Pressing further would achieve little. It wasn't about the salad dressing. It never was. Aaron stopped a few feet behind her mate. Her eyes were glued to the... Later, Captain Green reappeared in the cabin, his presence as unwelcome as before. His expression was carefully neutral, but the tension in his posture was unmistakable. "Dr. Johnson," he began, his tone overly polite, "I wanted to personally apologize for the misunderstanding earlier," she said mournfully. Amelia folded her hands in her lap, her gaze unwavering as she waited for him to continue. "We pride ourselves on providing a seamless experience for all of our passengers," he continued, his words rehearsed. "If there's anything we can do to make the remainder of your flight more comfortable, please let me know." It was the kind of surface-level contrition Amelia had encountered countless times before, an apology designed to soothe without addressing the deeper insult. "Thank you, Captain Green," she replied, her smile faint but pointed. "But what I require isn't comfort, it's respect. And that, I believe, falls outside your current protocols." "Safe ride in Haunted Mansion," said the machine. His forced smile faltered for a brief moment before he nodded stiffly. Without another word, he retreated to the cockpit, leaving Amelia once again to her thoughts. The hum of the jet engines filled the cabin, a sound meant to soothe and insulate its occupants from the chaos of the outside world. But for Amelia, it only heightened her awareness of the unspoken tensions within these walls. Moments later, the younger flight attendant, Laura, appeared. Her demeanor was tentative, her hands trembling slightly as she set down a bottle of water on Amelia's tray table. "If there's anything else you need, Dr. Johnson," she murmured. Please let me know. A number one mistake we make in the workplace is thinking that we can manage our own burdens alone. Amelia watched her retreat, her expression unreadable. She didn't need to hear the whispered conversations to understand what was happening behind the scenes. The quiet discussions among the crew, the strained interactions, they all painted a picture of a team grappling with their assumptions and discomfort. It wasn't overt hostility that wore a person down. It was the small, relentless acts of doubt and dismissal. It was the whispered conferences about her legitimacy, the veiled excuses for minor oversights, the half-hearted apologies. These moments were a reflection of a deeper societal issue, one that couldn't be solved by a single conversation or a forced apology. It was about the quiet erosion of dignity through 1,000 small slights, each one chipping away at the sense of belonging she had worked so hard to claim. As the flight continued, Amelia resolved to meet these microaggressions with the same calm determination that had defined her career. She knew that every pointed response, every moment of grace under pressure, was a reminder to those around her that she would not be diminished. Near the end of the flight, Laura reappeared with a small gesture, an extra dessert tray arranged with care. "We wanted to make up for earlier," she said softly, her tone carrying a mix of apology and hope. Amelia accepted the tray with a polite nod. While the gesture was appreciated, it did little to address the underlying dynamics at play. Actions like these might smooth over the surface, but they couldn't erase the quiet tensions that had defined the day. As the jet began its descent into Chicago, Amelia turned her gaze back to the window. The skyline came into view, a towering testament to ambition and progress. But inside the cabin, the atmosphere was anything but serene. This flight had been more than just a journey from one city to another. It was another chapter in a lifetime of navigating spaces where her presence was questioned, where she was forced to prove her worth, despite her accomplishments. Amelia Johnson, however, was no stranger to these battles. She carried herself with a resilience that came from years of breaking barriers, of pushing back against the quiet yet insidious prejudices that sought to undermine her. As the wheels touched down, she straightened her shoulders, her resolve unshaken. The fight for respect wasn't over. It never truly was. But Amelia knew she would face it with the same strength and grace she always had, turning each challenge into a stepping stone toward a world where dignity was not a privilege, but a right. When Amelia Johnson stepped off her jet and into the crisp Chicago air, she carried more than her luggage. The tension from the flight lingered, a quiet but heavy reminder of the biases she had confronted that day. Waiting for her on the tarmac was a black sedan, its driver, Marcus, greeting her with the warmth and respect she deserved. "Welcome to Chicago, Dr. Johnson," Marcus said as he opened the door for her. "Thank you, Marcus," Amelia replied, her voice soft but steady. The drive to Harper Holdings was uneventful, the city bustling with its usual rhythm. Yet, Amelia's mind remained preoccupied. As the CEO of one of the country's most prominent firms, she knew that her day was far from over. The challenges she faced on the jet were just the prelude to the resistance she would encounter in the boardroom. Arriving at the sleek, modern headquarters of Harper Holdings, Amelia stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement as she entered the building. The receptionist, Claire, greeted her with a nervous smile. "Good morning, Dr. Johnson," Claire said, her tone uncertain. Amelia's faint smile conveyed both acknowledgement and authority. "Good morning, Claire. Is the boardroom ready?" "Yes, ma'am. We're waiting for you." As she ascended to the top floor, Amelia's presence commanded attention. The low hum of conversation in the boardroom ceased abruptly as she entered. The executives, predominantly older men, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. While they were accustomed to her leadership, her unannounced visits always disrupted the dynamics they sought to maintain. Amelia took her seat at the head of the table, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension in the room. The meeting began, but it didn't take long for the subtle resistance to surface. "Dr. Johnson," Robert, one of the senior executives, began, his tone measured but patronizing. "About the new initiative, I think it's worth reconsidering the timing. It feels ambitious, given the current market conditions." Amelia tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharp but composed. Ambitious or necessary, Robert? She asked, her voice firm. Well, he hesitated. I simply think we should proceed cautiously. The stakeholders might perceive it as risky. Caution is important, Amelia replied, leaning forward, but stagnation is not an option. This initiative has been thoroughly vetted, and the data supports its implementation. Delaying it now would send the wrong message to our stakeholders and to our team. Her words left no room for doubt. The tension in the room was palpable, but Amelia's authority remained unshaken. This wasn't the first time her decisions had been questioned, nor would it be the last. As a black woman in a position of power, she had long since learned to navigate the quiet storms of doubt and resistance that followed her. These moments weren't about her competence, they never were. They were about the discomfort her presence brought to spaces that had long excluded people like her. Her leadership style, calm, decisive, and rooted in clarity, was her way of pushing back against those unspoken biases. Yet, Amelia understood that these incidents were not isolated. They were part of a larger, systemic issue. The challenges she faced in the boardroom mirrored those on the jet, a world that continually questioned whether she belonged. This wasn't just about professional spaces. It was about the subtle, insidious nature of prejudice that permeated society. From the assumptions made by a flight crew to the resistance of senior executives, the patterns were clear. Amelia's journey highlighted a broader truth. Success alone doesn't shield one from discrimination. Even at the pinnacle of her career, she found herself fighting for the respect she had already earned. Her experience serves as a reminder for all of us to reflect on our own biases. How often do we make assumptions about someone's competence or belonging based on their appearance? How do we challenge those biases within ourselves and our organizations? For Amelia, these battles were not just about her. They were about paving the way for others who would follow in her footsteps. Her resolve was fueled by the knowledge that every act of defiance, every moment of grace under pressure, was a step toward breaking down barriers. As the boardroom discussion continued, Amelia's clear authority set the tone. The initiative would move forward, and her leadership remained unchallenged for now. Leaving the meeting, Amelia returned to her corner office, its large windows offering a panoramic view of the city below. She stood there for a moment, reflecting on the day's events. Each challenge was a reminder of the work still to be done, not just for herself, but for the countless others who faced similar struggles. Amelia Johnson was more than a CEO. She was a symbol of resilience, a testament to the strength it takes to challenge systemic prejudice. Her story isn't just hers. It's a call to action for all of us to build a world where respect and dignity are not privileges, but rights. As the sun set over the city, Amelia knew that the fight was far from over. But with every step forward, she was reshaping the spaces she occupied, proving not only her own worth, but the worth of everyone who dared to demand more. As Amelia Johnson's journey on that private jet and in the boardroom is more than a story, it's a testament to resilience, courage, and the unyielding fight for dignity. Through her calm yet firm responses, she didn't just stand up for herself. She exposed the biases and assumptions that persist in spaces where they should have no place. Her experience reminds us that even at the highest levels of success, the battle for respect and recognition continues. It's a fight that countless people face every day, often in silence, and Amelia's story is a powerful example of how grace and determination can challenge these injustices. But this isn't just Amelia's story, it's a reflection of the world we live in. How often do we let our assumptions go unchecked? How often do we allow quiet biases to shape our perceptions and actions? Amelia's story is a call for each of us to reflect, to learn, and to do better. What would you have done in Amelia's shoes? Have you ever faced a moment where your worth or belonging was questioned? Share your thoughts or similar experiences in the comments below. Your voice matters, and together, we can build a stronger, more inclusive community. At Real Life Stories, we're committed to sharing narratives like this, stories of resilience, justice, and the power to create change. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. As we close, let's remember Amelia's key takeaway. Respect isn't given freely, it's earned. But once earned, it should never be questioned. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories that matter. Together, let's continue to shine a light on the strength and courage that shape our world.